My name is Fidelia. I'm 48 years old, living in a peaceful town in Ohio. My life has never been anything extraordinary. A stable job at the local pharmaceutical company, a small house with a backyard full of lavender, and most importantly, a son into whom I have poured all my love and hope. Jethro, 26 years old. Since my husband passed away in a car accident, I've been both mother and father. On cold mornings, I quietly folded the blankets, prepared breakfast for Jethro, and rushed off to work. In the evenings, I came home, cooked, cleaned, and sometimes barely managed to say a few words to my son before he closed his bedroom door, put on his headphones, and sank into his own world. I was used to doing more than talking. Jethro grew up with the sufficiency I tried to create, not luxurious, but never lacking. I thought I had done well until the day the company announced staff cuts. The meeting was held in a large room, and the boss read out the list of those who had to leave. When I heard my name, it felt as though my heart dropped straight to my stomach. I had worked there for 20 years, knew every hallway, every face, every process. I believed that my long dedication would guarantee me a safe position. But no, they said curtly, cutting staff for restructuring. I carried a box of my belongings out of the office, hearing the crunch of snow beneath my feet as I walked to the parking lot, my mind completely blank. I didn't tell Jethro. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want him to worry. I believed I could quickly find a new job. Over the years, I had saved carefully, had an emergency fund, and part of an inheritance left by my parents. I had always kept this a secret, considering it my last safety net. I had no intention of touching it unless it was absolutely necessary. In the following days, I sent out dozens of job applications. All the companies responded politely but indifferently. We will contact you if you are a good fit. The more time passed, the more I understood that at this age, it wasn't easy to start over. One Saturday afternoon, Jethro walked into the kitchen while I was struggling to prepare dinner. His eyes were unusually cold. "Did you lose your job?" he asked, his voice heavy as lead. I froze, the spoon slipping from my hand onto the floor. "Who told you?" I stammered. "One of your friends from the company. I just met them at the supermarket. Why did you hide this from me?" His voice rose, full of irritation. I tried to stay calm. "I just didn't want you to worry. I'm looking for a new job. Everything will be fine." Jethro let out a cold laugh, a sound that tightened my chest. "Fine? Do you think I can support you forever? I'm already paying off my student loans, and there's the mortgage on this house. I can't afford to take care of you." I looked at my son, the one I had sacrificed everything for so he could have a better life. "I never wanted to become a burden to you," I said softly. Jethro suddenly slammed his glass down on the table, water spilling out like his rage. "You need to leave. I can't stand this anymore. If you don't have money, you need to fend for yourself. I don't want a failure dragging my life down." I stood still. Each word was like a knife stabbing deep into my heart. I had never imagined that one day, my own son would kick me out of the house. That night, I packed my belongings in the small room that had once been my only comfort when I was tired. I didn't bring much, just a few clothes, some books, and a family photo from when Jethro was little. He didn't appear, nor did he say another word. I knew his anger had clouded everything. As I pulled my suitcase out the door, I paused for a long time at the threshold. This house used to be mine, but a few years ago I had helped Jethro get the loan and transferred the title to him, so he could feel confident owning his life. Now I was the one walking away, and he was the one staying. That night, I slept in a cheap rental apartment a few miles away. The ceiling was low, the yellow light was dim, but at least I still had a place to stay. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my calloused fingers from years of work, and whispered to myself, "Fidelia, you must stand up. No one will save you but yourself." In the days that followed, I started again from zero. I found a temporary job in a small bookstore. The pay was low, but the owner was kind and didn't judge a middle-aged woman like me. While working, I also took the chance to learn more about finance and investing, things I had never thought about before. Quietly, I withdrew a portion of the secret fund my grandparents had left me. Not much, just enough to open a small investment account and try buying an old apartment that needed renovation. I no longer wanted to live at the mercy of others deciding my fate. At night, when the town was asleep, I still sat there writing notes, calculating and making plans. The pain of being thrown out by my own son had not yet faded, but it gave me a new drive. I no longer wanted to live a withdrawn life, waiting for others to hand me security. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew I would never go back to Jethro begging for pity. One day, he would realize that the mother he looked down on was not as weak as he thought. Time passed slowly, but heavily. In the first days of living alone in the small rented apartment, I often woke up startled in the middle of the night. There were moments when I asked myself where I had gone wrong to end up like this. But then, when I looked in the mirror and saw the deep dark circles under my eyes, I told myself, Fidelia, you must not be weak. You must not collapse. The job at the bookstore didn't bring much money, but it was enough to cover essential expenses. The store owner, a quiet but kind man in his 60s named Victor, gave me flexible hours and sometimes shared his business experience. I learned many things from Victor, especially how he managed cash flow and customers. Every evening, after closing the store, I would go to the town library to study more about investing. I read books, listened to podcasts, and took online courses. I began to understand real estate, stocks, and how to manage risk. This knowledge opened up a new world I had never imagined before. One March morning, while arranging books in the store, I received a call from an old friend named Sandra. She had also worked at the pharmaceutical company before and was now running a small cafe downtown. Sandra said the cafe needed more capital to upgrade its facilities and open another branch. Fidelia, if you want to try investing, this is a good opportunity. I know you're careful, so I'm sure you'll think it through. But I promise I'll work as hard as I can to grow the cafe, Sandra said with determination. I was silent for a few seconds. My heart was beating faster than usual. Investing in a cafe sounded risky, but I trusted Sandra. I had witnessed her start her business from scratch. More importantly, I knew I couldn't keep working for others forever, scraping by on every penny. That night, I opened my personal finance notebook again. The money my grandparents had left me was still intact. I had only withdrawn a small portion a few months earlier to buy and renovate an old apartment. Now, that apartment was completed and rented out at a stable price. This cash flow allowed me to confidently set aside another portion to invest in Sandra's cafe. I signed the capital contribution contract and officially became a co-owner. In the following months, I worked at the bookstore while also helping Sandra manage the cafe. We worked tirelessly, experimenting with new menus, redecorating the space, and building a loyalty program for customers. The cafe gradually became a favorite meeting spot for many people in town. Revenue steadily increased, and we had enough capital to open a second branch in a busier commercial area. I began to see the light in my eyes again. I had work, a stable income, and most importantly, confidence. I no longer had to bow my head to anyone, not even my own son. A year passed since the day I left my old house. I had changed so much that sometimes even I couldn't recognize myself. I cut my long, familiar hair into a tidier style. I bought a used but very good car with my savings. My clothes weren't expensive brand names, but I chose outfits that made me feel confident and comfortable. Some afternoons, I drove down the road leading to Jethro's old house. That house was still there, but it no longer looked as neat as before. The grass had grown tall in the yard, and a few planks on the porch roof had come loose. I didn't go inside. I simply watched quietly from a distance, then drove away. Just when I thought I had laid the past to rest, Jethro reappeared. One late evening, as I was cleaning up the cafe after closing, my phone rang. I looked at the screen, and my heart tightened involuntarily. It had been a very long time since my son last called me. Mom. Jethro's voice was hoarse. Can we meet? I hesitated for a moment, but then agreed. We arranged to meet at a small diner by the highway. When I walked in, Jethro was there, head bowed, looking far more worn out than before. Are you in trouble? I spoke first. Jethro looked up, his eyes full of exhaustion. Mom, I'm in so much debt. My job isn't stable, and the bank is about to foreclose on the house.
I,
I need your help. I was silent for a few seconds. All the memories of that night I was kicked out of the house came rushing back. I tried to keep my voice calm. What do you want me to do? Jethro looked at me, his eyes pleading. I need money. Just enough to pay off some debt and keep the house. You're the only one I can turn to. I didn't answer immediately. I watched my son, the same person who had kicked me out of the very house I had helped pay for. A flood of emotions rose in me. Pity, anger, and a sharp sting of pain. But I knew I had to stay clear-headed. Jethro, I spoke slowly. Do you remember the night you told me to leave the house? Do you remember what you said? Jethro lowered his head. He didn't answer, only clenched his fists tightly. I looked out the window, where car headlights flashed past. In that moment, I realized I was no longer the same. I was no longer the trembling woman waiting for her son to decide her fate. I had my own life now, and I would not let anyone take that away. We parted ways in silence. I drove home with a heavy heart. I knew Jethro was desperate, but helping him now might only make him rely on others forever. I needed to find another way, one that would protect myself and also teach my son a lesson about responsibility. That night, I opened my computer and logged into my bank account. The money I had accumulated after a year of investing and running the business had grown significantly. I knew I was capable of doing something I had secretly longed for, reclaiming my old house, the one filled with memories and once a symbol of pain. I didn't plan to tell Jethro about this plan. But deep down, I knew it was time for me to move forward decisively. After the meeting with Jethro, I spent the whole night thinking. My love for my son was still there, but I couldn't ignore what had happened a year ago. I didn't want to fall back into the cycle of dependence and suffering. Nor could I just give Jethro a large sum of money and let him continue his reckless lifestyle. That would only drag him down further. The next morning, I contacted a friend in the real estate business named Marcia. I told her directly, Marcia, if there's an opportunity to buy back my old house, the one currently in Jethro's name, let me know right away. I'm ready to pay in cash. Marcia was a bit surprised but agreed to help. Less than 2 weeks later, she called me back. Fidelia, the bank has announced they will foreclose on Jethro's house due to overdue debt. I can help you buy it back at a price lower than the market value. I didn't hesitate. The savings I had accumulated after more than a year of business was enough for me to pay in full. I signed the paperwork and officially became the legal owner. On the day I received the keys, I stood in front of the familiar wooden door. Memories came flooding back. The nights I held Jethro in my arms reading bedtime stories, the simple but warm family meals, and that night I dragged my suitcase out of the house with tears streaming down my face. I placed my hand on the wall and took a deep breath. There was no bitterness anymore. I knew I had turned a new page. I didn't move in right away. I wanted the house to be renovated, both to generate rental income and as a way to refresh myself. I hired a construction team to refurbish everything from the front yard to the living room and bedrooms. After nearly 2 months, the house looked completely different, bright, neat, and full of life. While I was quietly rebuilding everything, Jethro kept calling for help. At first, his voice was still full of pride. Mom, I need you to lend me some money. I'll pay it back as soon as my job stabilizes. But I didn't answer right away. I only said, Jethro, I'm not a bank. You need to solve the problems you've created yourself. When he found out the bank was officially foreclosing on the house, Jethro was truly panicked. He came to the cafe where I was working, his face gaunt. Mom, I've lost the house. Can I stay with you for a while? I looked at my son, my heart full of compassion but no longer weak. I held his hand and spoke slowly. Jethro, I will help you if you truly want to change. But helping doesn't mean supporting you unconditionally. You have to learn to stand on your own. He lowered his head, his eyes red. I had never seen my son so vulnerable. I knew this was the moment for him to truly reflect on his life. A few days later, I invited Jethro to meet me at the old house, now my house. He stepped into the yard, stunned to see the house newly renovated and in perfect condition. Mom, you bought it back? He stammered. I nodded, my voice calm.
Yes.
This was the place I worked so hard to build. Now I've taken it back, with my own strength. Jethro was silent for a long time. I continued. You can stay here for a while, but you must work to cover your living expenses. I will no longer spoil you as I did before. You need to learn to be independent, Jethro. He lowered his face, tears streaming down.
Mom, I'm sorry.
I was so selfish. I gently squeezed my son's hand. I still love you, but loving you doesn't mean letting you disrespect me or destroy your own future. You must take responsibility for what you do. From that day on, Jethro began to change. He found a new job and no longer spent money carelessly. In the mornings, he helped me clean the cafe. In the afternoons, he worked at a transportation company in town. The first days were tough, and there were times he wanted to give up, but I quietly encouraged him. You're on the right track. Be patient. I saw the maturity slowly forming in Jethro's eyes. He was no longer the hot-tempered, arrogant young man. He learned to bow his head to learn and to appreciate what he had. The house was now both the place where my son and I lived and partially rented out to generate extra income. I was no longer dependent on anyone. The cafe Sandra and I owned was getting more and more customers, and both branches were operating steadily. I had found balance and peace, something I hadn't dared to dream of a year ago. One weekend afternoon, I stood on the front porch watching Jethro fixing the fence. He turned and smiled at me, a slightly awkward but warm smile. I suddenly realized that some losses are meant to make us grow, and also to teach the people we love important lessons. I whispered softly, as if speaking to myself. Fidelia, you did it. The golden sunset stretched across the freshly painted roof, warm and silent. I knew that from now on I would live differently, with no fear, no trembling before anyone. I had reclaimed everything, my freedom, my pride, and my own worth.